Thank you and welcome on this brisk, but importantly, rain-free morning. All right. One more time for the Concord Fifes and Drums. Concord Minutemen. My name is Paul O'Shaughnessy. I'm the board president of the Friends of Minuteman Park, and for better or worse, I will be your MC today. So, thank you for coming. And we have a very nice program lined up for you today. Number of speakers I hope you'll enjoy. If you're sharing today's events on social media, please use our hashtag to spread the news. It is Battlefield Stamps, one word, and thank you very much for that. And at this time, we ask that you silence any infernal devices and to preserve the moment here. And now at this time also, if you are able to do so, please stand for a presentation of the colors by the Concord Minutemen Honor Guard. We will also hear the national anthem performed by Hanover's own Adriana Kunovich.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets spread glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Detail, right face, to the front, march!
Thank you. Wasn't that wonderful? Thank you, Adriana. To get started, I'd like to invite Simone Montiglione, our superintendent here at Minuteman National Historic, to the stage for a few remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, Simone Montiglione.
Good morning. Welcome to Minuteman National Historical Park, a site steeped in the rich heritage of our great nation and a cornerstone of stories from the American Revolution. Later this week, we will, as a nation, be commemorating the 250th anniversary of the opening battle of the American Revolution. But today, the National Park Service is honored to welcome the U.S. Postal Service for their Day of Issue ceremony for the battlefields of the American Revolution stamp set. These stamps are not merely vibrant pieces of art. They symbolize our nation's history, honoring the pivotal sites where courage, determination, and sacrifice forged the freedoms that we cherish today. Minuteman National Historical Park is responsible for the protection and stewardship of the North Bridge, the battle road through Concord, Lincoln, and Lexington, where the shots that were fired between colonial militia and Minuteman and the British regulars ignited the revolution. This journey would not start and end on April 19th of 1775, but will continue for years across Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, and throughout the colonies. It is on these hallowed grounds that ordinary citizens became extraordinary as they rose to challenge tyranny. We must remember and honor those who stepped forward 250 years ago, not knowing what the outcome would be, but committed to their ideals of liberty and freedom. I encourage you to take a few minutes after the ceremony to walk through the battlefield landscape down to the North Bridge. Let's embrace the lessons learned from our shared history, remembering that freedom requires vigilance, unity, and a continuing commitment for all that it encompasses. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the U.S. Postal Service, a partner whose unwavering commitment to honoring our history made this ceremony possible today. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Monteleone. Now, before we move on to our stamp dedication, I would like to acknowledge some special guests that we have today. And as I speak your name, if you're here, stand and wave, just so we know. Jay Higgins, representing Congresswoman Catherine Clark. Trish Jackson, Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee. Michael Lawson, Boston 2026 World Stamp Show. Also, with us today, our local Postal Service team, District Manager Michael Rakes and Postmaster of Concord, Michael McCarthy, and their teams. Without them, the mail wouldn't get far. So up next, I am delighted to introduce two particularly special guests, the town manager of Concord and the town manager of Lexington, two towns that get along so well with each other. Please give a warm welcome to Kelly LaFleur and Steve Bartha.
Good morning. It is a true honor to be here with you today on this special occasion and at this extraordinary place where the echoes of our nation's first steps towards independence still feel fresh in the air. This morning we dedicate the battlefields of the American Revolution commemorative stamps. We're doing more than unveiling a beautiful set of images. We're taking a moment to reflect on the people behind them, on those who stood on the battlefields, farmers, merchants, immigrants, and tradesmen, and on the countless others who shaped the history, often without recognition. Some of those people are remembered in books, others live in stories passed down quietly through families, and many, of course, are lost to time, unnamed but not forgotten. All ordinary people, but choosing to be extraordinary, taking risks for the cause of liberty. Today we honor them all. For me, this ceremony and this tribute are also particularly meaningful. My grandfather was an Irish immigrant traveling to this country after the Great Depression, with little in his pockets but full of hope and chasing the possibility of a better life. He first found work in a furniture factory and then as a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service, a quiet, honest job that connected him to the community and the country he had chosen as his own. But at the age of 36, long past the typical age of enlistment, he volunteered to serve in World War II. He left behind a family, donned a uniform, and joined the fight for freedom. His enlistment wasn't driven by glory or ambition. It was driven by a sense of duty and because he believed in what this country stood for. The same promise that moved ordinary men and women in 1775 to take up arms of their own on their town greens, in their farm fields, and along these very paths. That spirit of quiet courage, deep commitment, and stepping forward in a time of need is what we honor today. It is in the design of these stamps, It's in the preservation of places like Minuteman National Historical Park. And it's in the work of so many, from the historians and artists to park rangers and postal workers who help keep these stories alive. Thank you to the U.S. Postal Service, to the National Park Service, and to all those who made today possible. May these stamps travel far and wide, carrying with them the spirit of the revolution and the stories that continue to shape our nation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Steve Barth. I'm the Lexington Town Manager. It's a pleasure to stand before you here at the Minuteman National Historical Park to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. I feel both honored and humbled to speak in a place so deeply tied to the birth of our nation. And before I start, I want to share, like Carrie, a personal story. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan called Petoskey. My dad was the president of the Stamp and Coin Club during my childhood, and so I was super excited for the invite this morning because my first job was licking and sticking stamps on envelopes for him. He was an accountant with a home office, and so he would mail thousands of letters, and my job was to get those envelopes ready to go. And we also would create art together out of low-value but high-interest stamps. There's a light switch cover in our bedroom at home that is adorned with famous poets and writers, and we would place them on the light cover, polyurethane them, and then we'd have them all over the house. And we would spend hours together going through binders and talking about the stamps that he was collecting. They were always very vivid and colorful. Many were faded, many were valueless, but they were all rich with history. And he would tell me about each stamp like a little portal into another place and another time and a moment in history. And today we're celebrating just one of those such moments. The Postal Service has a long tradition of honoring our nation's milestones. We were talking beforehand about the events that they get to do each year around the country, celebrating everything ranging from cats and dogs to the American Revolution, and how cool it is, and crowds like this come out to celebrate those things because there's a culture and a rich history around stamp collection, as I know personally. But stamps are more than just collectibles, and they're more than just a vehicle for sending correspondence. Stamps are storytellers. They bring history to our fingertips. They connect us to the ideals and sacrifices that have shaped our country. And stamps have a unique way of blending art, education, and heritage. They inspire curiosity. They encourage us to ask questions. In my father's stamp collection, I'd pull out a stamp and he'd say, "Oh, that one, let me tell you about that. Let me tell you the story behind it." And that's what today's stamp will do for future generations. Spark conversations about who we are and how we got here. So as we celebrate today, I encourage you to think of the commemorative stamps not just as postage, but as symbols. A tribute to the people who stood firm on this ground 250 centuries ago, that would be a long time ago, to fight for freedom and for independence. So a special thanks to the Postal Service for creating this meaningful reminder of our past, and thank you all for joining us today to reflect, remember, and carry forward the spirit of Lexington and Concord, I guess. Thank you.
Well, it's good to see they're getting along. Thank you, Ms. LaFleur and Mr. Bartha. At this time, it is my honor to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Love. Lieutenant Colonel Love is a director of the Historical Services and curator for the Massachusetts National Guard here in Concord. He has served in both the Army and the Army National Guard for 38 years, working in field artillery and logistics. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Love.
Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, fellow citizens, it's a privilege to speak today at this unveiling of stamps commemorating the battlefields where our nation was born. born not just in defiance and fire, but in resolve, in duty, and sacrifice. Today, we honor Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill, Trenton, Saratoga, Yorktown. Each of these hallowed places marks a moment when ordinary people did extraordinary things. But this morning, I'll share some thoughts on Lexington and Concord, the place where American liberty found its first defenders in arms. At dawn on April 19th, 1775, in this quiet countryside of Middlesex County, Massachusetts, farmers and tradesmen left their homes not for conquest, but for community. These were men of the Massachusetts militia, citizen soldiers who gathered on Punkatasset Hill and this muster field in response to a warning that British regulars were marching to seize their stores and powder. But the militia came not simply to defend gunpowder, nor even a town. They came to defend the idea of self-governance, of rights that no king could revoke. When those red-coated regulars reached the North Bridge in Concord, they found more than resistance. They found resolve. As Captain Isaac Davis of Acton declared to Major John Buttrick just before the fateful advance towards the bridge, "I haven't a man who's afraid to go." Minutes later, those men fired what Emerson would call the shot heard round the world. This was no mythic moment. It was real, it was raw, it was American. The fight at Concord marked the first time colonial militiamen were ordered to fire on British troops. Unlike the confrontation earlier that morning on Lexington Green, where British confusion led to a tragic volley, the men at Concord stood their ground, received fire, and returned it with deadly effect. This moment, this stand, transformed a colonial protest into an armed revolution. April 19th would see the men of Lexington rally and join Concord and 25 other Massachusetts towns, over 4,000 minute and militiamen, as they drove the redcoats back to Boston. But let us remember, those who stood here at Concord and all those who fought that April day were not soldiers in the modern sense. They were bakers and blacksmiths, deacons and farmers. Yet they had trained, they had drilled, and when the time came, they fought, not just for Massachusetts, but for all of us. They set the example of what the citizen soldier means to this country. Today, that legacy lives on, not just in dusty pages, but in living lineage. 4 units in the Massachusetts Army National Guard trace their direct heritage, their lineage, to those very militiamen who turned out on April 19th, 1775. These are the 101st Engineer Battalion of Methuen, the 1st Battalion of the 181st Infantry, and the 125th Quartermaster Company of Worcester, and the 1st Battalion, 182nd Infantry Regiment in Melrose. In the U.S. military, only these 4 organizations are authorized to display the Lexington Battle Streamer, which represents all of the fighting on April 19th. As a symbol of the blood and bravery shared between past and present, these are not just honors attached to flags. They are living threads in a fabric of service that stretches unbroken for 250 years and beyond. Let us also remember that the spirit of April 19th is not simply military. It's also civic. The same men who fought here returned home to build towns, raise families, and form a republic. That is the true power of the citizen soldier, not only to fight for liberty, but to live it, shape it, and defend it across generations. As we unveil these stamps today, we are not merely celebrating ink and paper. We are affirming that the sacrifices made at Lexington, Concord, Battle Road, and all the battlefields commemorated here still shape the country we inhabit. We're saying to the world, this is where liberty was born, and these are the people who stood for it first. So let us honor them not just in ceremonies, but in how we live, by staying informed, staying engaged, and standing ready to protect the freedoms that they first defended. On behalf of the Massachusetts National Guard, whose roots run deep in the soil of Lexington and Concord, I thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Love. Well spoken. And now, perhaps a quick drum roll. There you go. The moment we are here for, our stamp dedication. To do the honors, I am pleased to introduce our dedicating official, Judy DeTurek. And Ms. DeTurek comes to us from Washington, D.C., where she serves as the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at the Postal Service headquarters, and you are a long-term veteran of the Postal Service, responsible for industry relations, sustainability, corporate information activities, and including the Historian Office. Anything else? So please welcome Judy DeTurek.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's my honor to be here, and thank you all so much for coming. Good morning. On behalf of the 640,000 men and women of the United States Postal Service, I am honored to join you for today's ceremony of our Battlefields of the American Revolution stamps. These stamps celebrate the 250th anniversary of our nation and pay tribute to the heroes who fought and sacrificed for American independence. The Minuteman Historic Park, where the opening battle of the Revolution is brought to life, is a most fitting location for today's ceremony. The stamps focus on 5 milestones of the Revolution. The battles of Lexington and Concord, which showed the world how citizen soldiers could defeat the highly trained British military. The Battle of Bunker Hill, which discouraged the British from launching direct assaults on American positions. The Battle of Trenton, which boasted American morale and inspired a new wave of recruitment. The battles of Saratoga, which convinced France to provide the military and financial support that helped us win the war. And the Battle of Yorktown, which led to the final British surrender. We are fortunate to have distinguished guests who will talk more about these battles at greater length. But first, I would like to invite our participants to join me for the official unveiling and dedication of the Battlefields of the American Revolution stamps. Please come to the podium, everyone. And for our audience, I'm going to do something revolutionary. Instead of our traditional countdown, 1, 2, 3, when we're ready to unveil the stamps, I will ask you all to join me in 2, 5, 0. Okay, we ready for a drum roll? All right. Okay, is everyone ready? All right, here we go. Drum roll, and 2, 5, 0. Stamps have been called our nation's calling cards, which is why we take such great care with their design and art direction. Long before the public sees them, all stamps start with an idea, an intention to honor a person, commemorate a defining moment of history, or celebrate an aspect of the American experience. Turning those ideas into art requires months, even years of research, brainstorming, hard work, and creative inspiration. Today, stamps join more than 60 others that have honored the figures and events of the American Revolution. The Postal Service has used a wide variety of designs, including engravings, famous paintings, maps, and quotations that reflect the complexity of the subjects and the perspectives of each generation. Today's stamps are unique because they offer something that's never, ever been done before. Art director Derry Noyes combined photographs and illustrations to tell the larger story of the American Revolution. She recognized that photos, reduced to the size of a postage stamp, would convey too little sense of the human drama that occurred. She envisioned photos paired with illustrations that would span two stamps but remain visually coherent if one appeared in isolation. The photographs would provide the context for the illustrations by the brilliant Greg Harlan, and the illustrations would give resonance to the photographs. I think you'll all agree they created a masterpiece in stamp design that depicts our history in a new and relatable way. So on behalf of the United States Postal Service, thank you again so much for being here, for being part of this remarkable event, and thank you for helping us honor the enduring legacy of the battlefields of the American Revolution.
Thank you, Mr. Turek. Aren't those wonderful? Yeah. I am now pleased to introduce historian and author Donald Hafner. Professor Hafner taught political science at Boston College and has written widely about the history of Lincoln, Massachusetts in the 18th century. Professor Hafner is also one of those rebellious Minutemen with the Lincoln Minutemen and graciously serves alongside me in the Friends of Minuteman National Park. Please welcome Don Hafner.
We chase Paul out of Lincoln year after year, and he keeps coming back.
I tried.
There really is no more fitting a place for the U.S. Postal Service to unveil a set of stamps in commemoration of the American War of Independence. No more fitting than here by the rude bridge that arched the flood, where both sides, and I emphasize both sides, British and American, first learned how long and terrible this war would be. Today's event marks actually two commemorations, however, not just one, and let me explain by conjuring up an image for you. Imagine that it is September of 1774, and a carriage is making its way from Boston to Philadelphia. And in the carriage are three men. One of them is John Hancock, the wealthiest man in Massachusetts. The second one is Samuel Adams, a man so indifferent to wealth that his friends have purchased for him a new suit, new shoes, and a new wig so that he might look respectable when he reaches Philadelphia. And the third man is John Adams, a man who could be so vain and irritable that his travel companions probably wished from time to time that they could throw him from the carriage. These three men were on their way to the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. Already in Massachusetts, before they left, there was talk of military preparations for a possible war. In a few weeks after they left, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress would urge all towns to form companies of Minutemen and would begin preparations underway to form a Massachusetts Army of 15,000 men. 1 out of every 4 men in Massachusetts would serve. So was the intention in this army. This is how serious it had become. We might well imagine that when these 3 men set off from Boston in their carriage, they shared a common worry. If it came to war with Britain, would Massachusetts stand alone, or would the American colonies stand together in common purpose and in common principle? When these 3 men arrived in Philadelphia at the First Continental Congress, they found that indeed there was common principle and common purpose. And yet you and I have to ask, how had such unity of mind and heart become even possible across the 1,000-mile distance from Maine to Georgia? Such unity was possible because 130 years before 1775, the town of Boston had formed the first postal service in British North America. And during those 130 years, more than 1,000 miles of postal roads had been built, binding Maine to Georgia. And over those roads traveled John Dickinson's Letters to a Pennsylvania Farmer, talking about the injustices and the dubious authority of Parliament over these colonies. Over those roads traveled Samuel Adams' scathing political attacks on British policy. Over those roads traveled Phyllis Wheatley's poems in newspapers in defense of liberty. Over those roads, copies of the South Carolina Gazette could flow north to the taverns of New England, and articles from the Boston Evening Post could travel south to the coffee houses of Savannah. When the delegates to that First Continental Congress assembled in Philadelphia in 1774, we can well imagine how strange they were to each other. Think of Samuel Adams with his broad Boston accent learned from mingling with the laborers on the Boston docks, struggling in his rumpled suit, standing next to regal Edward Rutledge of South Carolina, trying to figure out what on earth that Scots-Irish accent was actually trying to convey. And yet these men, these new Americans, knew each other's ideas and passion for liberty well before they met each other in Philadelphia. And in the same way, the raw American soldiers of the Continental Army knew each other's ideas and principles long before they stood shoulder to shoulder in danger at Trenton and at Saratoga and at Yorktown. As you in New England will recall, stamps were not always popular in the American colonies. Yet the stamps released today by the U.S. Postal Service are a vivid and artistic commemoration of the heroic stand by these American men and women through 8 long years of heartache and sacrifice and struggle to bring about American independence. And equally important, these stamps remind us that the American Revolution was possible because for more than a century, the powerful bonds of thought and of heart and of devotion to liberty from Maine to Georgia had been strengthened by the American Postal Service. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hafner. I am now delighted to introduce Liza Stearns, Deputy Superintendent of National Parks here in Boston. Deputy Stearns supports the Boston National Historic Park, Boston African American National Historic Site, and the Boston Harbor Islands National Recreation Area in their mission to celebrate cultural heritage and provide outdoor recreation, and I've been there, I'm also a client. Recreational opportunities on land and water. Everyone, Ms. Stearns began her career at the National Park Service in 1985, and in 2015 joined the National Parks of Boston staff as Director of Education and Youth Engagement. and you have been nationally recognized for your work in place-based learning, an innovator in planning and activation of national park sites and stories. Please all welcome Liza Stearns.
Wow. That seems like a very lengthy introduction for my small self. It's so incredibly wonderful for me to be here with you today, and I'll close my remarks today by sharing exactly why. I do want to start by just saying good morning, and thank you all for welcoming here today for this incredible program. This is a significant moment to come together in our nation's history with the unveiling of the United States Postal Service first issue American battlefield stamps. And I want to thank the previous speakers for those incredible remarks that set the context for us all understanding why we're here today. And I know as I look out at this room and I see all of you, you have arrived with your own stories. And I hope this becomes a part of the chapter of who you are. At National Parks of Boston, we have the honor of preserving and interpreting the Battle of Bunker Hill. That battle took place 250 years ago in about 2 months. So a lot of anticipation in terms of what's happening up here today and what will be happening down there. The battle at Bunker Hill, really Breeds Hill, and I know a lot of you are chuckling out there about that misidentification, was one of the first really pitched battles where colonial patriots went head-to-head with a major army force, with 1,500 lives lost. It was a civil war. It was family and friends, British citizens for the most part, fighting one another about ideals and beliefs and values that formed the core of their identity. This was not an easy battle. No battles are easy. But just remember, it wasn't an us versus them, it was a we versus us. That unto itself is something so profound. I encourage you all to think deeply about that. In just over 2 months, we will commemorate that 250th anniversary of a battle. Down in Charlestown, we will not do military tactics, and I know you must be following the news and maybe wondering why. The focus of that commemoration will be on the values and the ideals that my predecessors here on the stage spoke so eloquently about. The monument that stands atop Breeds Hill in Charlestown is a Boston icon. It is featured in photograph on the stamps, and for that I am grateful. It was dedicated in 1843 and became one of the nation's most pronounced sites to come together, to gather, to reflect, and to remember the lives that were lost on that hill and the deep, profound, and enduring meaning of that loss of life. It was a no-turning-back moment. The British Crown knew it, the colonial patriots knew it, and people, it is a moment that galvanized people from throughout the colonies to gather together and to organize. Today, the monument continues to be a place for gathering. It is a place that, when you look at it, is a beacon of light. It is a beacon of hope, of promise, and of possibility. And it's also an incredibly awesome place that invites us each to consider, what next? What is our role in terms of shaping the way forward as a people and as a nation? I hope to see you there soon. On behalf of the National Parks of Boston, I do want to say we are incredibly honored to have our sites and stories featured in this postage stamp collection and to be here on this day of first issue. I also want to share on a personal note, back in 1971, when I was 9 years old, I had a stamp collecting dad. And I know from looking out at all of you, you are familiar with the energy and passion that comes with collecting those stamps. I too was a licker. And in that year of 1971, my mom passed away. I was 9 years old, and my dad was like, "Oh, she's got to figure out who are my kids and how do I get to know them." And he threw us in the back of an old paneled station wagon, and we headed across country. And he took us to national parks. And he took us to those parks so that we could build stories and memories together as a new family. And darned if my dad didn't decide, well, you know, we should probably go try to find sections of the Pony Express Trail. And it was August, and there was no air conditioning. Like, we didn't have a radio in the car. We had windows, they did work, and I was thankful for that. But we slogged around looking for segments of the Pony Express Trail, and we followed them, and it's some of the most magical moments. This is long before that those sections became part of the National Park Service. So this day, this moment, standing here with you, brings up so many memories for me, and it reminds me of just how important our historic sites, our historic trails, our national parks, and moments like this where we can come together and gather, build the memories that keep us whole as a people and define us who we are, and remind us of how we're connected to the cadence and the pageant of the footsteps and ideals of the people who have come before. We are the makers of the next chapter. So let's all think about what were the people fighting about in 1775, 76, and on forward. The ideals of liberty, of justice, of freedom, of voice, of independence, and how will each of us shape that way forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Stearns. All of us have a role to play, don't we? Our final speaker today is Lauren Roberts. Ms. Roberts has served at Saratoga Historian for 16 years. She currently chairs the Saratoga County 250th anniversary of the American Revolution Commission and has also been appointed to the New York State's 250th Commission. In 2019, Ms. Roberts co-hosted WAMC Northeast Public Radio's podcast, A New York Minute in History, which has received two Edward R. Murrow Regional Awards for Best Podcast, as well as 2 New York State Broadcaster Association Awards. Everyone coming up here is a real slacker, aren't they? Please welcome Lauren Roberts.
Good morning. Thank you to the United States Postal Service for coordinating this great ceremony on this incredibly historic spot of our American landscape. I have the privilege to serve as the Saratoga County Historian, where I work in partnership with the Saratoga National Historical Park, which includes the Saratoga Battlefield and several other sites associated with the 1777 victory at Saratoga. And I'm honored to speak today about the impact Saratoga had on the American Revolution. Let's go back for a minute to the summer of 1777. Summer, it's a little bit warmer, right? British General John Burgoyne's army has invaded New York from Canada with the objective of reaching Albany, where he would rendezvous with other troops, British troops, and they would decide what they were going to do from there. The first part of that campaign had gone really well for Burgoyne, and he continued to move south until about mid-August at the Battle of Bennington, where he loses about 1,000 men. And it was an attempt to restock his dwindling supplies. So the fall is coming on, he's low on supplies, and now Burgoyne has a decision to make. Turn around, go back north. He can regroup, try again next campaign season, or push on and take his chances in getting to Albany. And Albany was so close he could taste it. Spoiler alert, he decides to push on to Saratoga, and as we might say, there in Saratoga, he backed the wrong horse. On September 19th, the British Army clashed with the Americans at Freeman's Farm. It was a long and bloody back-and-forth battle. At the end of the day, the British held the field and saw it as a technical victory, but the Americans had effectively stopped their progress towards Albany. So it was a stalemate. After a lull in action, with Burgoyne waiting and hoping for some assistance, a second battle occurred on October 7th, where a fearless and aggressive Benedict Arnold leads his men to overrun the British defenses. Through a cold October rain, the British began a slow retreat. So slow, in fact, that the Americans are able to completely surround them and cut off any attempt at escape. And so on October 17th, 1777, General Burgoyne hands over his sword and his army to Horatio Gates, making the first time in history a British field army surrendered. The victory at Saratoga inspires proclamations of days of Thanksgiving as far away as Virginia. In fact, it is the reason behind the first National Day of Thanksgiving proclaimed by Congress that December. It also gives Ben Franklin the leverage he needs to move forward, move the French to finally become our ally, which was desperately needed, and also improve the morale of the Americans. The magnitude of what happened in Saratoga is felt around the country and around the world. As more and more countries got involved, what started out as a colonial rebellion becomes a global war. The victory at Saratoga inspires generations of future Americans to commemorate these events. A Civil War regiment is named the 77th in their honor. Multiple warships have donned the name USS Saratoga, and thousands of acres of landscape have been preserved so that 250 years later, we can set our feet on the ground where history happened, and we can continue to tell their stories. Thank you to the United States Postal Service for recognizing the importance of these battles, for the preservation, and for highlighting these places through beautiful artwork and engaging photography. As the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution greets us just over the horizon, let's remember that the significance of our founding and remind our fellow citizens that the torch has been passed and now it's our turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. We are coming to a close, and I'd like to, but first I have just a few thanks and reminders, and then one more thing to do. I'd like to thank our program participants, all of them, as well as everyone in the National Park Service here today and at the Postal Service here today. I want to thank you all for being such a great audience also. Thank you all. You can purchase your Battlefields of American Revolution stamps and other items at the Postal Service retail booth right in back there. And you can also buy them, of course, on USPS.com. And our program participants, all of them, will be available by the stage here shortly to autograph today's programs and other commemorative items. And I want to thank you all again. And before we go, many of you have little flags. I think we need a huzzah, do you not? Ready with flags? And huzzah! Three. Huzzah! 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 Well done. King George heard that one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the bridge, enjoy the park, and enjoy Concord. God bless. Thank you.